have one public forum today. So do I have a mover? Deputy Mayor, seconder, Councillor Foley. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you very much. We'll see you again soon.
Good. Thank you.
Right, we go. We do not have any extraordinary items. We do not have any local board input. And we'll go straight to item 8. We've got Dr. Imogen Bassett and Sam Hill. And we've got the approval of the early public consultation materials for the Regional Pest Management Plan 2030-2040. Scary thinking that we're almost, working towards 2030. But we'll get you to kick off. Just the button on the right there.
Right one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Kia ora koutou. Thanks for having us this morning. Yes, I'm Imogen Bassett. I'm supported by our General Manager, Sam Hill. And so as Councillor Hills has pointed out, this is a really very early preliminary stage of the Regional Pest Management Plan. So today we'd like to request your approval of the early consultation documents. I'll give you a little bit of context about what the Regional Pest Management Plan is for those of you who may not already be familiar with it, and where we are in the process and the kind of framing for this document. So Regional Pest Management Plan is a regulatory document. It's created under the Biosecurity Act. This is part of our regional council function. And it's about us giving effect to our regional leadership role, which we're mandated under the Biosecurity Act. So it's about coordination of pest management across the region, so it's not about those things that are sort of for individuals to manage that really pertain just to them, but it's about what can we achieve collectively as a region, and it's basically a long list of different species that we name as pests, and then we set outcomes and rules or deliverables that we put towards achieving those outcomes. And it's very broad ranging, so it can be anything from possums to Cody dieback to fish or anything that's an exotic species, so it's quite a wide ranging plan. And we have a currently operative plan which is funded by our Natural Environment Targeted Rate. And that current plan is scheduled to go through to 2030, which may feel like it's still quite a long way away, but we actually know that the Biosecurity Act processes are quite cumbersome and lengthy, and so we really do need to get cracking in order to make sure that we have a new plan in place by 2030. We also know, irrespective of that sort of regulatory imperative, it's also timely for us to think about what might have changed and how we adapt our plan. So we know 10 years is a really long time in pest management, and we're seeing new patterns of new species emerging as pests all the time, and that's very much linked to new things coming into the country from international trade. We also have things which might have already been in the country for a long time, but which start to become a problem. We know often there are quite long lag times for pests, so they can be around and not look like they're a problem, and then they start to become more apparent as a problem as time goes on. And we also know that as our demographics, our land use changes, all of those sort of human activities really alter what's going on. And we also know that our community's views on things are changing all the time as well. So it's really timely for us to reconsider as a region, what do we think are the priorities in this space. So just to sort of recap on the time frame, so we came to this committee in a workshop earlier this year to give you some preliminary insight and get some feedback from yourselves about this phase of the consultation process. And then today is that point where we get you to approve the consultation materials. Later this year, for a 6-week period centred around October to December, we'll have that public consultation process. And then that's feeding in alongside a whole lot of other activities towards creating a draft new proposed plan, and that will be the full, that's the main public consultation phase, which is not till 2027. So this is where we're at today, is really much a preliminary fact-finding, information gathering phase that will help us then work towards that 2027 consultation. And then from there we expect that once we've done submissions analysis and potential court challenges and that sort of thing, we'll have an operative plan in place from 2030. So yeah, so whilst we're going out for seeking some feedback from the public at this early stage, that's not the only thing that's feeding through to that 2027 consultation on the proposed plan. So alongside, we've already underway with our mana whenua engagement. We will have quite an extensive program of engaging with both internal and external stakeholders over the next couple of years to make sure that we understand their views and potential priorities and impacts on them. And meanwhile, our team are also busily doing a whole lot of technical review, looking at what do we know about the various different species and the values that we're trying to protect. So the consultation that we're asking from the public at this early stage won't cover all the things in the plan, bearing in mind that we've got over 300 species of pests in our existing plan already, so as I say, very broad. We're not asking about all of them at the moment, but just a few sort of key issues where we know there are some emerging big ticket new problems coming along and we don't have them in our current plan. We don't know necessarily how the public feel about them. So asking about them, and then some other cases where we've got existing pests, but we think we don't understand enough about the current public views on them, and we want to really understand more. But plenty of other views will be canvassed through more targeted stakeholder engagement. So in terms of those early public consultation topics for the public, we've got these 5 topics that we specifically want to ask about. But in addition to that, there'll be an open-ended question at the end. So if anybody has other issues that they want to raise, and we know that there will be lots of other things that the public will want to let us know about, then they can raise whatever those points are in that open-ended question. And the framing for this early public consultation will be very much about the outcomes that we want to achieve. So, you know, we know that focusing on the pests, the killing side of thing or whatever, you know, that's it's quite negative, quite disengaging for a lot of people, and actually it doesn't give effect to what is, you know, we don't do pest management just for the sake of it, we do it because we're trying to protect something, right? And so the consultation will be branded Let's Protect Our Environment, and the sort of the key messaging will be really around how do we all together as a region protect the things that Aucklanders value, and that's things like our Indigenous wildlife, our farming, primary production, our cultural values, you know, those sorts of things. So we'll be making a real effort to make sure that we get this out to interest groups and wide audiences. So there'll be a range of avenues for that. We'll have webinars, drop-in sessions. A lot of our strategy will be around direct sort of marketing to stakeholder groups, because we know this is quite a niche topic from our previous consultations. You know, we don't think it's worth spending lots of money on talking into the ether to the general public, because a lot of people aren't really that engaged with this sort of thing, but where we've identified that there are particular issues where people are above averagely likely to be interested, you know, we'll be making an effort to really push that out through those existing networks to make sure that people are aware. And really working as well to make sure that we're reaching a diverse range of Aucklanders through a variety of different channels as well. Yeah, so just to sort of recap in terms of the next steps, after today's approval and then that consultation period centred on November, then we'll be looking to do submissions analysis. We'll bring that back to yourselves in the middle of next year. We'll also be taking those submissions analyses to local boards in the middle of next year, and so they'll have an opportunity to see what have their local constituents said about these issues, and then they can provide some feedback as well. And alongside all of that, as I said, we'll be doing our mana whenua and stakeholder engagement carrying on. And then we'll be coming back to yourselves to do some workshopping and things to then get to that point of having a new plan, a proposed plan, sorry, that we can consult on in 2027, which we aligned with the long-term plan consultation. So I think that's it from me, but happy to take questions through the chair.
Kia ora, Imogen. Thank you. I'll just go to the resolution just to make sure, in case I didn't get a chance to talk to Member Ashby, but I spoke to Member Henare. There was just a missing hokura in that one. It was just a mistake.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, that was an oversight. Apologies.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to be clear, everyone, this is not the first and only time we will be consulting, and the big plan will be the big consultation, but this gets us on the road and helps us and the community kind of work towards what will be in that final plan, on top of and building on all the great work that is in it from the last time, which feels very recent. Councillor Walker online, I've got a number of questions.
Sure. When I attended the last Hauraki Golf Forum, we had a presentation around avian bird flu, which you'll be familiar with. And it's very, very clear that not only is this an emerging threat, but there's a high likelihood of its transmission with potentially catastrophic consequences for a range of species, birds, but possibly other species. So is this something that that we can bolt on in terms of the submission process, so that we use it to generate some awareness, but also some preparedness? And the related issue, of course, is that if and when this occurs, the budgetary implications will be significant. I mean, of an order of magnitude far worse than Kalupa.
Yeah, kia ora. Through the chair, yes, that is a significant concerning issue. I think we're not looking to sort of bolt it onto this particular consultation, in part because we're looking really at the moment to be clear that the central government is leading the preparedness and response for bird flu, and so our role in that is really around amplifying central government messaging at this stage. And the other thing, I guess, to consider is that because it's not currently in the country, it's not really compatible with what is normally considered to be in scope for us consulting on for a regional pest management plan. I think, notwithstanding that, absolutely acknowledge that there is a real importance that we are, as I say, amplifying those communications, and that our communities are really aware of this and know what to do. We also don't want to panic people, though. That's the other thing. So there's a real sort of fine balance to be had there. We are working really closely with central government to make sure that we've got preparedness in place, and we don't know at this point how bad it will be, but yeah, we're working really hard to make sure that we're as well prepared as we can be.
Thank you, Imogen. And yes, I think we've sent memos out on that back in April or May, but I think it would be good if there is more information to be refreshed to send out to the full committee.
I think we have yes, we've got a memo in train to be coming back to you with more information. Thank you.
Member Ashby.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, look, a good approach, I think, and good to see cats on the agenda. Just a couple of clarifying questions from me. One is, do we have a handle on on the cost of the problem of pests to our regional economy, in terms of the importance of maybe putting that message into the scheme of this? Is that within scope? So, and I know the numbers are probably, the numbers are hard to nail down, but there's a couple. So MPI came up with, these are national ones, 9.2 billion a few years back, and some work from University of Auckland placed it at 12 billion, and these were on the lower end of what they thought. Do you think, do we as, does council have a handle on that kind of scale at a regional scale, and do you think that would be useful context to front foot into this, just to communicate the need?
Yes, I think that's a really good suggestion, and I've made a note to just add some more of that sort of financial clarity to our consultation materials. I think it's a very complex exercise to quantify the costs of pests, and particularly you get into some complicated things about which values are actually appropriate to monetise. But notwithstanding that, there are some data available that can at least give an illustrative sense of the scale of the impact on some monetary values. So I think we could absolutely build some of that in. So yeah, great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. The other one is just so I guess it's clear in my head, because I know that through the RPMP, you can, tag unwanted or pest plants, and you work with nurseries. Does that extend to the retail sector? So, I guess it's hooked to my last point around money and the cost, both in terms of the cost to nature, but also the economic cost and the labour of volunteers. Spending probably the equivalent of millions in one catchment, pulling, I don't know, jasmine out, and then you can go down to Bunnings and buy some jasmine and plant it right next to where you just pulled it all out. Is that kind of thing within scope, or is that more of an MPI?
No, it is in scope. So I said that the Biosecurity Act processes are very lengthy. One of the things that makes them really lengthy is that there are some quite detailed requirements on us in terms of articulating the benefits and costs, both of inaction and also of our proposed course of action, and in some cases you might optioneer other options as well. So we will need over that period of time to look at how do we, it doesn't have to always be quantified as money, but we do need to be able to articulate in some way these are the costs that are associated with allowing these species to continue on their course of invasion, or conversely, here are the costs associated with action.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And just two more from me. Good to see, there's one of the focus areas at this initial round on predator-free islands, but just a question around what about predator-free mainland sanctuaries, and is that, I guess that's going to come in the fullness of time in the actual plan, but also I guess the importance of those at a regional biodiversity level, both existing ones and potential ones. Is that, I know it's in scope, but what are your thoughts around?
Yeah, we know that islands are defendable and achievable in a way that sort of elevates them beyond the mainland in many ways. On the other hand, we do know that there are some areas on the mainland that are, have incredibly high biodiversity value still, such as Waitakere ranges, and so whilst we've kind of tailored the public question to islands and to an extent peninsulas, because we want to temper that expectation about what is realistic and feasible, but that's not to preclude being able to have wider conversations about what else might be important on the mainland. And our current plan has a real focus on protecting Te Waunui and Waitakere and Hunua as significant areas of mainland biodiversity protection, and we can absolutely be looking at what we should be doing in that space going forward. Yep.
Cool, thank you. And the last one from me is just the report notes the importance or value of some introduced species. I think pigs is the example for subsistence sort of hunting. Are there other examples that you might use or draw on of other exotic species being identified as important in similar ways to communities, and in particular Māori communities?
Yeah, so I think this is something that we have to be really cognizant of in biosecurity, is that many of the things that can cause harm in some circumstances can also actually be really valued by people in other circumstances. So that's part of our framing of how we're communicating this, is to really be acknowledging of those values. So many things might be a valued garden plant, or they might be a hunting resource, or all sorts of different ways in which they might be valued. For Māori in particular, we do know that pigs and deer and goats as sources of kai are really key issues, and we will be looking to really explore that through our mana whenua engagement and think about, we know that there's not a homogenous view on that, so it might be different in different places, and there are things that we can absolutely explore about what's appropriate spatially. We don't have pig control, for example, in our current plan on Aotea, because we had a clear steer at the time from Ngāti Rehua, Ngāti Waiki Aotea, that that pigs are an important subsistence food source there. So we can explore that on a real head by real head basis.
Cool, that was it. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Member Ashby, Councillor Darby.
Thanks, team. Thank you for this. Just in the the current plan, we identify cats, brackets, unowned, as a pest. But we don't have any registration system for cats. So we say unowned, but there's no system to identify the owned and the unowned. So what is our discussion on cats this time? Because I feel like we do need to have that discussion about cats because the evidence is overwhelming in terms of what cats do to Indigenous wildlife. So what is our, are we going to be brave enough to have this discussion? At what level are we going to be having it?
Yeah, so, and cats are a great example of one of these species which absolutely do have significant environmental impacts and at the same time very valued by, you know, over 40% of our households have them as much loved family members, so we have to be cognizant of that balance. But the good thing is that many of those responsible pet ownership behaviours like registration actually are good for cats as well as wildlife. So for example, we know that after the Christchurch earthquakes, 85% of microchipped and registered cats were returned to their owners, or pets in general, were returned to their owners, whereas only 15% of unregistered animals were. So, you know, there's incredibly clear benefits of these things for the cats themselves as well as the wildlife. So our consultation document is really looking at that nexus of responsible pet ownership that is a win-win, and so what we've proposed is that we look at a range of different responsible pet ownership behaviours, desexing, microchipping and registration on the companion animal register, which already exists and which is a rapidly growing trend in cat ownership, as you know, that registration is becoming much more common. And also keeping cats at home on the property as well, and we're looking at what do people feel about those different types of behaviours in potentially different spatial extents. So, you know, how does the Aotea community feel about those things on Aotea versus how might people feel on potentially another motu or on the mainland across the region, or with a focus on areas that are right near threatened species. So we've got those questions in a kind of like a matrix of the different spatial extents, so people can indicate how they feel about them in different situations. We've also asked a question there based on some of the feedback that we had from Councillor Sayers, I think, at the workshop around how do Aucklanders feel about us providing more support to desexing and microchipping in a non-regulatory sense. So, you know, we know that desexing rates historically have been quite high, but they've taken a little bit of a dive down post-COVID and the current sort of cost of living crisis and that sort of thing, and that represents a potentially long-term burden for us in terms of the costs of that. So, yeah, so we're absolutely asking the question, but really at pains to make sure that we're communicating in this in a way that feels positive for cat owners as well as people who love wildlife.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. And also on the, so that's the cat discussion. I'm sure there'll be a lot more of it. On the existing list, dogs, feral dogs, I can't see them identified.
No, because unlike cats, there is national legislation around dogs, and so dogs are managed through our bylaws process. So we haven't included them in the RPMP, and I don't know off the top of my head of any councils that have done that.
Okay, so because they're managed elsewhere through bylaws and other legislation, they're not on the list.
Correct. Yeah.
Even though we know feral dogs do incredible damage in the bush, you know, Northern brown kiwi, which will be in our region as well.
Yeah. And so there's nothing in the Biosecurity Act that precludes us from including them. So, I mean, it is something that we could look at.
Can we look at that? Look, I've got some personal experience. I'm not going to tell you all my parochial stories, but I mean, forest and bird, you know, have got a lot of evidence there that, you know, the damage that feral dogs are doing as well.
Yeah, and I think through our organisational refresh, you know, we're now in the same directorate as the animal management, regulatory and licensing teams, and you know, we're really looking at how we can work more closely with them on some of these pet ownership things that really there's a
Okay.
definitely an interface there.
And the last one, I don't want to run off all the species, but the eastern rosella, that's not on the current list. Is it proposed to be added to the list, the eastern rosella?
Yeah, so it's in, if I remember correctly, it's in an exclusion program for Aotea, but for the mainland, it's not. So we did propose it, and then that was removed as a result of the judicial review proceedings with the New Zealand Parrot Society. Our approach has been really to focus, though, on the species which aren't already widespread. So eastern rosella is a good example of how widespread exotic parrots can quite rapidly become if we don't manage them effectively, but really the sort of sweet spot is to get in before that happens. So our focus is very much on things like Indian ringnecks, monk parakeets, and so we will be looking at what parrot species are potentially a risk that we might want to preemptively manage, but also, you know, again, we know that these are really valued by people, and so we'll be making sure that we're really engaging with the Parrot Society and other stakeholders around that to understand this situation.
Great, thank you. I'm happy with the follow-up on the feral dogs. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, Imogen, Sam, as a councillor, I'm incredibly proud of the work that you do, and especially the support that we get through the Hauraki Golf Forum and the representation that we're able to bring on behalf of Auckland Council. My question was really posed in part by Wayne Walker. So avian flu is not, but how do you interface at the moment on issues like that? We mustn't undermine the work that central government must do, but how are you interfacing with MPI on these and other challenges right now?
Yeah, so we've been involved in some interagency planning on that. So our colleague Phil Brown went down to Wellington recently for a scenario planning day that involved representatives from the Ministry for Primary Industries, Department of Conservation, Ministry of Health, other councils, and so really working together to make sure that we do understand, and all of those government agencies have got different parts of the puzzle that we're really making sure that we're connecting well with. We've got an operational structure in place that's got connections with them through our technical advisory groups and those different operational work streams that are aligned with an emergency response SIMS function, so that we're ready to go, you know, in the event of this moving from preparedness to response.
Yeah, I'm aware that there's quite a few, there's a lot taking place with the Callirpa at the moment. I think on the 6th of September there was a really critical meeting, and so it's good to know that there's going to be a bit of a seamless approach between government, central and local, on those particular matters. So I won't interrogate you any further on that, but it's reassuring to know that there is a plan in place. How are you going to interface with the newly formed Parks Committee if we're looking at the timeline of this going forward? And obviously some of the work that's being undertaken within regional parks will come under the delegations of the Parks Committee. Have you thought about how that, with the consultation that's going out, might be undertaken?
Yeah, I mean, this goes to we know that the Pest Management Plan has got some significant implications for parts of our organisation, and parks is one of them, but not the only one. And so absolutely we've looking at a significant program of internal socialising and making sure that we've got those connections. We understand what their views are, what their needs are, and how the Pest Management Plan might serve to protect parkland and the values on that, because we know, you know, that there are some really high ecological values that are in public ownership, and so that's a really important component of what we can protect for Aucklanders. So yeah, absolutely, we will connect on that.
Oh, that's great, because that's a good way of capturing all the volunteers that we need championing this for us. And the final question I had is, can you tell me a little bit more about freshwater gold clams?
I can. We don't want them. It's the short thing. So they're only known from a couple of locations. So they were first found in the Waikato River, and we know that they have a really bad track record overseas of being very problematic. So they have up to 70,000 offspring a year, and those offspring are microscopic initially. And so if you've been using your boat or your wetsuit, whatever, in water that has the clams present, you can have the baby clams on your gear and just not be aware of it because you can't see them. But they're very, very hardy. So when you take your wetsuit or whatever and then go the next day to another water body, those clams can still be alive. And so really, in order to prevent them transferring to another water body, you need to get your gear disinfected and then completely dried. And from the point that it's dry, it needs to be dry for 48 hours, which is quite a hard ask. So we know that the risks are quite high of them being moved into the Auckland region. There is national collaboration going on, so we're feeding into all the regional councils, again working with central government to look at how do we manage this with a national view to trying to contain it as much as possible into that Waikato area. But it is a hard ask, and so that's why we've thought about in our region what are the things that we could do to really protect some of our important water bodies. We know it's not just an environmental problem from an infrastructure perspective. They clog up water takes. We're already starting to see some impacts on the water care intakes that are in the Waikato area and that sort of thing. And so it could potentially be very problematic if we end up.
Well, thank you. That's really helpful.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. And I think, well, yeah, it would be good to have a bit more information. We did have the presentation on gold clams, but then that was when Carl Lupa was first on the scene as well. So it would be good to have a bit more information. I know Watercare sent us some information earlier in the year as well, but just how that has changed over the last 18 months, if anything.
Yeah, we can do that.
Right, Councillor Ferry.
Thank you. To return to cats for a moment, acknowledging that's going to be the big topic of discussion. You mentioned before in your answers to Councillor Darby around the different framework legally for dogs. And I'd just be interested to see through this early engagement process whether we have any ideas that come up around engagement with central government around potential legal frameworks for dealing with cats, or indeed other pests that currently don't have those kinds of frameworks. So are we acknowledging that, we don't sign off on this plan and it doesn't come into implementation until 2030, but is it possible that if we're getting a strong sense of community support, or there's some ideas that come through that could be really useful in this space, we can raise those with central government earlier? How does that sort of roll out?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that in the last term of government that there was a petition to Parliament around a national cat legislation, and that went to select committee, and there was some support from all of the parties that were in Parliament at the time, apart from ACT. We know that there was some interest from some parties in re-looking at that, and so that's something that staff are sort of keeping an eye on as that goes along. It would absolutely be open to council to have a formal position on that. At the moment, it's not something that you've considered and taken a position on, but at any point that's open to you.
Okay, so we don't have to wait for this plan process. Okay. One of the things I think would be really helpful, and I'm really glad to see there's a deliberative democracy process happening as part of this, I think, if that does look particularly at the cat question, I think that would be really helpful for us to understand. And I'd really like to see included in there some information for people about how this works overseas. I'm aware, for example, a number of Australian cities have rules now that do not allow outdoor cats, and that's very much becoming the status quo. And I think if people are sort of aware that we're a little potentially out of step on some of this stuff, that some of those conversations might be a bit better. The other question I have is that last time we went through this process, the public consultation got very fraught, and in particular there were some staff who were really targeted, I think, in a way that was unacceptable. So what support are we putting in place for staff who are going to be fronting some of these conversations, because it's really important that we keep them safe?
Yes, we're acutely aware of that issue. So we've made the call that rather than, so last time we had sort of town hall type presentations, PowerPoint presentation, Q&A type thing around the region, which were quite well attended, but some of them in the cat topic were quite fraught. So we've made a call that we will have that kind of information sharing will be done via webinars instead, so that we've got that ability to keep staff safe. And we will have security at any in-person events, and we'll have a comprehensive health and safety plan around that. Yeah.
Thank you. I would just also encourage you to perhaps have some conversations with the elected member cohort, including local boards, about how we should support staff and de-escalate in those situations as well. I think that would be really valuable.
That's a great idea, and I think really we've learned a lot from last time. We also know that there are some really front-end things that we can do to reduce the likelihood of escalation in the first place. So that's really when we think about how we are communicating this plan, and that real focus on the outcome, the values that we're protecting, and really acknowledging the value that cats have. That this is, nobody is disputing the value of cats as a loved family member. So being really clear about that right from the get-go, I think, is important too.
Great, thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, a very good point, and I know that Imogen, yourself, and I'm sure Sam face some of that unacceptable behaviour, and really somehow positively pulled through that because you knew you were doing the right thing for the right purpose. But I think it's on all of us too to back you up and ensure that we're backing each other up through that, because passion is okay, but unacceptable behaviour is not. So kia ora. There are no other questions, so I'll get you to step back, and we might have a Councillor Fletcher would like to move, and maybe Member Ashby, did you want a second? Yeah, so we're done here. So thank you very much. Just briefly from me, that this is a start of the next process, but it doesn't negate or reduce any of the current plan that was worked on by many people over many years to get where we are. But this is obviously a statutory process that takes some time. But it will include and does include those things, as Councillor Darby said, around the sale and supply of and what Member Ashby said too, plants and animals and things like that. And some of those issues did take some time through judicial review, and of course allowing things like garden centres and pet stores to run their stock out or change the way they're doing, or pick species and plants that can help keep their businesses flourishing without damaging our ecosystem. So it's a broad plan, and this will just be a starter for 6, and everything will come back to this committee or a future committee for final sign-off when we have the full plan out. So it'll be a lot of detail, and there'll be more workshops, so no one should feel worried about any details that might be going out to the public, because we will have another look at that. So kia ora, and thank you very much. Are there any other speakers? I think so. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? No? Perfect. Thank you very much. Right. Moving forward on to item 9, the Auckland Water